Welcome to Flourishing Unfiltered, the podcast for high achievers who seek a professional life that feels as good as it looks.
We talk about the unseen journey of struggles on the path to success that people rarely talk about.
I'm Kieran Smith, positive psychology and leadership coach and consultant.
And I'm Dr. Michael Neuhaus, positive psychology and self-leadership speaker and consultant.
Before we begin today, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're recording. We pay our deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
As we share our stories today, we honour the rich tradition of storytelling that has been passed down through generations.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Future of Flourishing, a futures thinking media, training and venture lab dedicated to bridging the gap between scientific knowledge and practical application in the field of human flourishing.
The Future of Flourishing is committed to creating a comprehensive ecosystem of communication and innovation platforms. Find out more about the Future of Flourishing at futureofflourishing.com.
If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.
Hey, welcome to the final episode of Season 1 of Flourishing Unfiltered. I am so excited because we're going out with a real bang because our final guest is none other than Shona Vertue. Now, Shona, for those of you who are not familiar with her, is an ex-elite gymnast turned certified personal trainer and yoga teacher with nearly 500,000 followers on Instagram alone and one of the most popular yoga channels on YouTube. Shona's Vertue method combines weighted resistance training and cardio with her lifelong passions, yoga and meditation, and is now practiced in over 65 countries around the world by thousands of people. She encourages clients and fans alike to acquire new skills whilst training and to play and have fun rather than just focus on aesthetic goals and punishing routines. Bravo, Shona. And by the way, her clients include none other than David Beckham. Anyway, Shona has lived between London and Sydney for many years. She has the cutest squish of a baby daughter, Ayana, and makes me jealous frequently with the delicious meals she gets spoiled with by her partner, Justin Wong. Oh, and because, of course, having a baby, currently a mum to care for, and being a full-time fitness influencer apparently barely fills your diary, she's now also a sports psychology graduate and host of the Vertue Podcast, in which she uses a biopsychosocial lens to traverse through the intricate pathways of what it truly means to be well. And here is the most important and exciting part. Shona and I share the same birthday. Shona, did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Well, there you go. How cool is that? How are you, Shona? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very stoked to be here.
Oh, amazing. And we are so honored because obviously your career path, Shona, is nothing but just astounding. I would love to start with the same question we always start with. What inspired you to create this immense career?
Well, being a gymnast actually was definitely the beginning. I will just make a slight correction. I am an aspiring sports psychologist, not quite finished studies yet. My God, they're still going. It's going to take me a long time.
You've been doing very well.
We're on the path. We're on the path. But yes, it's very. It's a slow one, but for good reason. Maybe we can touch on this because I'm sure you have much to speak to this. But it's a slow one and one that I think sometimes gets. I think people underestimate just that psychology pathway, like how long it really takes to get accredited, and then you're also kind of in the midst of like let's say the school of life as well, and so trying to juggle that is incredible, but also yes, quite the journey. So really what started me on this journey was gymnastics, and I mean there's not much to fill in on that intro. I have to say you kind of touched on everything, which is amazing. So really thank you. It's one of the best. But yes, gymnastics was what inspired me, even though obviously at the time I didn't know that was going to be, a foundation. I mean, how could I started when I was 4 years old, got put into a program called Jumping Jelly Babies and was extracted from that program, put into the elite program. And then that was when I started training as an elite gymnast. And that brought me so many lessons to which I still draw on to this day now as a PT yoga teacher and young, budding, aspiring sports psychologist eventually.
Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah, and an incredibly amazing journey too, Shona. And I'm very curious here to sort of pull a few things apart. If we look at that CV, it's very impressive and very exciting, and it seems to be that we're just continuing to add to the excitement there. Has there been a time, whether it be being a gymnast, just getting your podcast up and going, even motherhood, where you've had maybe even a little bit of self-doubt or been a little bit unsure as to whether or not this is the pathway to go down, whether or not this is the block that I want to fill what little time I've got still in my day. Has that ever happened at all? Have you ever had any thoughts of that nature?
No, I just strive for total perfection, never a problem. I never run into any roadblocks. Everything's perfect and wonderful.
Fabulous, and that's a wrap on the episode.
It's funny because I have to say, I really, before we hit record, I was like, oh my God, I've had a wild day. To be honest, I would say that my day is filled with roadblocks and, yes, ups, but so many downs. And when I say downs, it is not always like downs as in a down, sad feeling, although 100% those happen, but it's just downs in the sense that you feel that kind of like, you question whether this is the right path, or you feel a little bit lost, or you just wonder where your motivation is today, or maybe you're too motivated, you're actually really super anxious, you feel completely unfulfilled, or any of those things can happen all the time. And I think that I have come to a point in my life where I'm actually really grateful for the bumps in the road, because, and I say that with caution because I'm kind of like, if there is a universe listening, don't give me more. But at the same time, there is a part of me that's really grateful for them, because they are the, I love some of that Stoic philosophy that's like, the obstacle is the way. The only way is through. And I learned so much, not by avoiding the obstacle or the challenge, but by actually trying to go through it. So yes, there have 100% been many, many times, not just in my life, but throughout the day, where I am juggling some kind of roadblock, some kind of problem, putting out a fire or something along those lines. And what is the saying about being a sailor, skilled sailor? Smooth sea, never made a skilled sailor. Is that the same?
I think you're speaking to two people that are definitely far from sailors.
I think it's
I've got a
license. Smooth sea, never made a skilled sailor. Or it's probably not that, and everyone listening is going to be like, this is terrible, Shona, because you'll get that hindsight bias. And be so mad at yourself for... Oh, I'll be mad at myself. So yes, basically I welcome them.
Mm-hmm. I would love to know, are there particular struggles that you feel like are reoccurring, like bigger themes that you have to constantly push through? Is there anything you would highlight there?
Yes, there are lots. So now I feel like I'm entering the doctor's office.
And only ever feel as... share as much as you're comfortable to.
No, of course. No, but I feel this is perfect, actually, because I do feel comfortable to share, and you can tell me if I'm oversharing. So I think that the constant reoccurring themes as a businesswoman, and I say as a business owner, and then also as a business owner who is a woman and who is now a mum as well, there is this constant theme of, am I doing enough of each of those things? Am I doing them well enough? And not so much am I a fraud, because I don't feel that sort of like I shouldn't be in this place. I know I've worked hard to be here, and I know that not only have I worked hard, but I really do the due diligence to be in the place, if that makes sense, probably the wrong word, but I really try to do the best in the moment that I'm choosing. However, there are times where I absolutely feel like, well, today I get to the end of the day and I think, oh, hang on, I spent, a couple of hours away from Ayana today. I wonder how she's feeling. And then you start to project those running insecurities onto the situation, onto the behavior. So for example, it might be a case of, I had to sit down and take 2 hours away to do a lecture or study or whatever it might be. And I come back to Ayana, my daughter, and I look at her, and if there's any moment where she sort of like looks away or cries or whatever it might happen, something really normal, I will then project all of my guilt onto that situation and go, oh, it's because I spent 2 hours doing this thing. And vice versa, it might be that I spend a whole day with Ayana and then I come back to do a lecture or work or something, and then I go, oh, I'm not doing enough on this thing, or this could have been better. And then, so it's that constant shift between, am I doing enough in this circle? If you think of the Venn diagram, I'm like, are my circles balanced? I'm not sure. So I think that's a big one for me.
Yeah. And I guess that makes it clear to me also why you mentioned the word fraud in the beginning, although again, no, you don't feel exactly like a fraud and so forth. But if you're constantly stretched across all those different domains and areas, you just know you don't have all the attention and time and focus available for each and every single one of them as maybe another person would who's not as stretched, right?
Yes. But then I think this concept of being stretched, it's like we all feel, okay, I shouldn't project on it, but I feel like most of us feel like we're busy, right? And then I have the internal narrative that's like, well, maybe I just don't value it enough. So then, and I speak to my clients about this stuff where they're sort of like, I'm busy, so I feel like I don't have time for exercise. Now, I am not the type of trainer that's like, well, it's because you don't value it, because I think that that's a very frustrating response to receive from someone in regards to exercise when you really do feel stretched, particularly business owner or parent or whatever it might be that is creating busyness. At its core foundation, maybe it is a question of value, but so be it. Like that's fine if that is your value. So then it's just like about trying to juggle to create opportunity for you to still be able to do the thing that you value, but maybe not value as much as your career right now or as much as your children right now, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Shona, too. So like, you just to almost just go back just a smidge here where you're sort of saying around, that guilt sort of creeps in, right? Where you take some time to step away and from time with your daughter to do work, the things that we need to get done in life as well. I'm curious, how do you find the balance and what that balance might look like? But also, do you have any tools or strategies that you use to overcome those thoughts as well?
Yes, I do. And I'm not sure if they are psychology approved, because maybe in my mind I feel like
let's find out.
Let's find out. Like you can judge them for me. Yes, but basically I feel so. I use time blocking a lot, and I often, when I share some of my time blocking, I know that, very experienced parents will often be like, good luck with that. Okay. And I'm like, yes, I know. But there's two reasons I time block. One is to keep me on track, for sure, as best as possible. But obviously my daughter is not going to be on track with the time blocking. So for anyone that doesn't know what time blocking is, I didn't know what it was before I started uni actually. So it was something that I had to do, or I just would never stick to a single task. And I'd always be flopping around between 2, 3, maybe 5 different tasks at uni and work and whatever. So time blocking is essentially where you will set aside, you look at your schedule overall, and you will only work on a single task within a single time frame of that day. And it can be really beneficial for anyone who has a gazillion things going on at once. And if you happen to be a procrastinator like I can be, mixed in with any of that self-doubt or any of that let's call it perfectionism that kind of comes in and causes me to procrastinate and not do the essay or not do the program or write the email or do the thing that I need to do. So time blocking enables me to just go, this is the only task I'm going to do at this time. And why it's good is because when you have like a huge project in a faraway deadline, when you don't time block, or at least when I don't time block, what happens is that I wait for the pressure to build up 2 days before, and then I try and get everything done. And that's really bad for my physical and my mental health. So time blocking is like basically just a way to strategically start doing things in smaller bouts until the job is done. So it'd be the difference between like building a house in 2 days versus building a house brick by brick by brick, right? So it's one single brick, laying it down. You obviously have to start in advance, but it enables you to kind of get things done in a day. So I said there are two reasons. One reason is just generally for pragmatism, for making sure jobs and things get done. But the second reason I do it is for that guilt factor, because I also time block in time that I'm going to spend with Ayana. And maybe some parents are going to be like, that's terrible, you should spend all the time with your child, or how could you, or, you know, it should be all devoted to child only. And there's times when I do feel like, oh, I wish I could fully, completely do that, but I just can't. It's just not practical for me. I have other things going on. So time blocking enables me to go, when I am with Ayana, I am fully and completely present, because I know that I have done all these other things. Or I know that, okay, coming up is I've got this time that I'm going to have with Ayana. So anything I have to do in these other time slots, I'm going to do them with as much focus as I possibly can, because I do not want to be thinking about them when I'm actually with her. So phone goes off, or not off, but you know what I mean? It's like to the side. I'm just so present. And I think the difference between that and then feeling like you're scattering between motherhood and then this thing and then that thing, it's so... the quality, even though it seems like you're getting this huge quantity of motherness, you're actually getting like a poorer quality. So I just found it was really helpful for me on that.
Yeah.
Oh, so beautifully explained. And absolutely is that, you know, a psychology approved method, apart from the fact that I'm a big fan to use whatever tool works for you, you know, regardless of whether it's approved by anything or anyone, let alone a science. And it's also with the perfect sake, because I was going to ask, you know, then what helps you with those feelings of guilt? But you just, you know, explained that perfectly, because I think so many people always say, you know, I don't have enough time in the day. And it's not so much about time as it is about energy and focus or attention, isn't it? And I think it's so valuable what you said, you know, then at least you are fully with your daughter when you have that focus and attention scheduled in for her. I think that's just wonderful. And obviously one of the biggest reasons why it also works, that whole idea of time blocking, is because of this thing called attention residue, isn't it? So the whole idea that multitasking doesn't focus is because our brains just sort of get stuck on one thing, and it's not really easy to just switch to the next thing and then switch back. We think it's easy to do, but our brains say, nah, we're not that developed yet.
Exactly. Task switching is it's so addictive.
Absolutely. And Shona, you've just validated, I mean, Micah and I know the sort of the science behind this, but you've just validated the way that we live our lives too, I think, because it's safe to say that is very much how our approach to how we've had this podcast come to fruition, and how we juggle it in amongst everything else that we're doing as well. Micah's got an incredibly busy schedule, and I'm studying full-time, working full-time, and then trying to find time for exercise and family in amongst all of that as well. And I very much agree and love the notion of time blocking as well. And Michael will attest to this as well. Just recently, she shot me a message. I think it was like on Saturday, and I just didn't respond until this morning. I had a digital detox. And it's like, because when I'm present with, you know, what I had going on the weekend, it's like I'm present. And I think that's a great way to sort of not necessarily justify, but balance out that time when we might experience guilt, when we feel as though we should be present somewhere but not somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, because actually something that is coming up culturally, and maybe there's going to be a little bit of a cultural clash at times, like with different generations. I'm in the middle, I feel, of obviously everyone's in the middle of two generations, but as in, I feel like with technology, I'm old enough that I didn't grow up with it, but young enough that it's still a very, very important part of obviously my job and my life. And so I saw that transition, you know, the transition from like, honestly being really true to your word. Like we used to have a place, I don't know, you guys probably know, like where you would say, okay, let's meet at 12 o'clock. In Sydney, it was like, let's meet at the town hall steps. And you'd sort of get off the phone to a home phone number. I used to memorize I can still actually say some of my top 3 best friends in primary school, their phone numbers. And you'd hang up and you'd just get there. And if they didn't turn up, you would wait. And you'd wait probably for quite a long time. God knows what I was doing, like staring at, looking at people, looking outside as opposed to down here. So you're kind of like, it was a very different world, and I feel really grateful for that. But what has come of this yes, we've had all the conveniences of technology. Sorry, I'm running 5 minutes late, or I have Google Maps, all of that stuff, really helpful. However, it has meant that psychologically we feel this I feel as though people feel owed a response and an immediate response. And sometimes I feel like this. Sometimes I feel like I just want to be in my life and not be on my phone constantly replying to something, or constantly, and that's not to disrespect people's time or their questions or anything like that, but I think being boundaried with like when you're going to use your phone or your emails. I see a lot of psychologists actually will say, hello, when you respond to their email, they say, I check my emails on Friday mornings at 9 to 11. And then like they'll have a full schedule for when they check their emails. And I was like, that is really healthy.
So interesting, because I was about to say the word boundaries it's become such a buzzword, but for a very good reason. I feel like we need boundaries more than ever before, because the lines are so blurred between everything, right? Work life, private life, social lives, whatever that might be. So, I mean, I don't have my, times at which I read my emails or respond to emails in my email signature, because I think there should be a mutual understanding that no one should expect any of that either. But I don't know, can you share a little bit more maybe about how you manage boundaries then yourself?
Not very well. I'm going to be honest with you. Not very well. And I go through these periods of what feels like these manic states. I mean, not to trivialize anyone that goes through a true manic state, but it feels like that for me. It feels like I have these moments where I'm like, oh my God. And then I'll just kind of have this moment where I go, oh, I need to close my laptop. Oh my God, what did I do? And so I'm still learning how to kind of refine that process a little bit more, because it was fine when I was 25. Truly, it was fine. But I'm 37 now, and it was fine even just before I had a baby. I could live in that state from like high to low, like really big up and down in terms of intensity, and being boundaryless and just like, yeah, sure, text back 11 p.m. Oh, cool, yeah, oh, what? I'll get something. Obviously, I work on 2 time zones. I have a lot of work in the UK, and so I will get an email, and so I would just immediately stop everything I was doing to do something, and I just can't do that because I pay the price. And something that I've had to juggle, I talk about this time blocking, but my time blocking at the moment still looks like 2 hours in the morning for university and 2 hours in the evening after Ayana's gone to bed for work. That's it. That's all I get at the moment while Ayana's going through a bit of a sleep regression, and while I don't have anyone else helping me with care. So when I have like a grandparent here or something like that, I can quickly take a couple of extra hours. But otherwise, that time slot that I have for Ayana is actually quite nice and really chunky in the middle, and great for her and great for us to play and bond. But truly it means, okay, I put her to bed and then I have to work. And so if I don't get that work done in those 2 hours, it then gets pushed not to the next day, but to the next day, if that makes sense. Like everything kind of gets shifted. So boundaries, I would say, are not just like a fun thing, as you say, like this buzzword or this thing that is just making things a bit cleaner. It's actually completely a necessity for me, because if I don't just stick to the thing that I said I would do, or stick to the project that I have to work on, and it's really like, I feel like in my brain I'm doing reps just like I would in the gym. It feels like I'm repeating something and working as hard as I can, and when I fail and I go off task, or I go and start I'm sure everyone can relate to this idea of you're working on something that's really challenging your brain, and just you'll find a reason. It could be so innocuous, but you'll find a reason to pick up your phone and open up Instagram or open up something that is so unrelated to the task that you're doing. And it's almost like a drug to get you off the hard work. So it's sort of like when I'm training people in the gym, or I've taught classes and things like that, it's like when people will come out of the exercise to tie their shoelace that didn't really need tying, or they'll quickly fix their ponytail even though it didn't need to be fixed until the rest period, or these little things that we do. So I think that boundaries is actually like a constant practice. I don't think that we're ever perfect at adhering to the boundaries that we set for ourselves, but there's a really true freedom once you can actually find it.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned it's like doing reps in the gym as well. With those psychological skills, it's exactly that. We have to practice them, and not every situation will be the same. There'll be some new experiences we make where we have to apply what we can already do maybe quite perfectly right now to a new context and so forth. So absolutely agree. And such a good idea to think about it in those terms.
Yeah, and one of the things that I want to learn a little bit more about, Shona, is we've spoken a lot about the notion of time and how we utilise our time. And I think that's for some of our listeners, they might be at a point where they feel as though things are going well, whether it be in their business or in their leadership and how they're undertaking things. But they might be wondering whether or not it's time for them to sort of stretch themselves a little bit further, maybe undertake a little bit of extra learning. I wonder if you'd be willing to share with us and our listeners what led you to that decision to go back and do a bit of extra study and stretch yourself a little bit more with an already pretty busy and full plate?
Yes. So, where will I go with this? So to be honest, the psychology desire had come from a very young age. Actually, when I was around 4 years old. How old are you in kindergarten? Something, four, maybe 3, 4,
yeah.
4, 5.
Yep.
Maybe. My parents were having quite a messy divorce, and so I was going in and out of a lot of child counselling. Part of it was for the court, and part of it was just because my parents were obviously like slightly concerned at this kind of tumultuous time that I was kind of a part of, and I was an only child in this relationship. Now I have a half sister with the next family. But basically, when I was going through this, I remember sitting in with these developmental psychologists who were amazing. I don't know why I had such a real main character here, but I remember sitting in these counseling sessions, and they used to turn to me and they'd say, "Draw a picture of how you're feeling right now." And I was like, oh my God, I know what they want me to do. So then I'd draw this picture of some dramatic scenario, because I was like, I thought that was what they would want it. Maybe it was just me being a people pleaser, but I was like, oh, they're going to want some drama here. So I'll draw something dramatic, even though I was feeling relatively okay. Now, maybe my behavior and certain choices and certain things that were going on spoke differently, but the drawing I gave was very different. It was just more, it wasn't that I was lying, but I was just like, I draw a picture of me and my parents holding my hands, like tearing me from one side to the other, and I'd be like, they need to learn to ask better questions that are going to get deeper. And I said, and I can even see the room that I was in, it was like after school, it was dark everywhere, and I remember sitting going, I am going to become a child psychologist, and I'm going to do a much better job than these people. I was so angry saying it. And then I didn't. So I continued with gymnastics. I then became a dancer. And then obviously, like the rest is history, I continued with more physical stuff. And so it wasn't until working as a PT and a yoga teacher and noticing and recognizing how much people I could give them and write them the best program, the best, and I'd say to myself, I've written the best, this is going to work for you perfectly. It's 3 days of this, it's 2 days of that. And it didn't, there was something that I couldn't quite get to the bottom of, because I didn't, obviously, I hadn't gone back to school yet to do this psychology degree, that I was like, there's something missing. And it was behavior, and it was behavioral patterns, and it was understanding how behavior can be one thing and how we feel about ourselves can be something completely different that actually dictates our behavior, if that makes sense. So our values could sit somewhere, but there's something else that's kind of governing things. So I thought, if I really want to help my clients, if I really want to help people that engage in my programs, I'm going to have to get to the bottom of psychology and understand how behavior works. And that was what led me to study. So it was really, actually, I owe it to the Vertue crew. I owe it to everyone that's ever done one of my programs. The Vertue method itself has done very, very well. I've been very successful in my business, and I really felt like I owed it to everyone who had ever done a program to get better at helping them with their behavior and their behavioral patterns. So that's what pushed me to do it. So if you are in that position, if you are feeling like, I think I could go back to study, then think about who you're doing it for that's beyond just you, if that makes sense. And there's nothing wrong if that's no one and you're like, no, I'm just interested in, history or something, and it will obviously add in some way to the richness of your life that you can then impart to someone eventually, or people eventually. But I think that for me, I had to be doing it for this deeper reason, and it really is helping me with everything that I create in terms of the programs moving forward.
Today's episode is brought to you by positivepsychology.com. Positivepsychology.com enables and energizes coaches, psychologists, therapists, and educators worldwide by sharing expert knowledge and experience within the field of positive psychology. To browse their vast library of evidence-based articles, courses, and exercises, head to positivepsychology.com. Oh, I love that. You know, being of service is such a motivator. And you would know that from self-determination theory, that whole aspect of relatedness, right? But we also know that from positive psychology and our flourishing model, you know, connection and doing things for something beyond ourselves is such a motivator, and also so fulfilling for our souls and really lights our fire kind of thing, whether we're aware of that or not. 100% agree. You know, you don't have to do everything in service of someone else or a particular community or something like that, but it will most certainly be a wonderful motivator, and I think bear a lot more fruit in terms of the fulfillment you gain from that.
Yeah.
Shona, I would love to know if you could look back at, let's say, maybe, when did you start the Vertue Crew? After age of 24 or something like that?
Age, I don't know.
Okay.
So it was when I moved to the UK. So I was 27 when I moved to the UK.
Okay.
And it came off the back of actually living in London and realizing, so in Australia, everything's very aesthetic driven. Maybe, obviously because the weather is a lot better, maybe not in Victoria, but the weather is a lot better. And so people do tend to be slightly more aesthetically driven. And I didn't know that until I moved to the UK and suddenly realized, I couldn't get my clients to train so that they could look good in a bikini, which is how I used to motivate people. Yeah. Because I worked in a gym in Bondi Beach, world famous, Sydney Beach. So it was like, it was so easy because everyone was naked or half naked all the time, right? So they felt this like sense, and I didn't even realize, I don't think it was damaging, because I don't think that being motivated by aesthetics is damaging. I just think that it can't be the sole motivator. It's like kindling. It'll last for like 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. That's why there are so many programs that are like 8 weeks to fit or whatever, because it's pretty much what I've found, at least anecdotally, is that people can motivate themselves for that long if they know that in 8 weeks I'm going to be quote unquote beach body ready. Not my quote, but quote, right? Yeah. I moved to the UK and suddenly it was like 8 weeks until you're in a trench coat again, and so it's like there's nothing there. So then it would have to be something else. So I started to talk to my clients, especially my female clients, about, well, let's just get you doing a pull-up. Or they're like, I've never been able to do push-ups. I'll never be able to do that. I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, what? No, we're going to do this. You can be ready. Totally. Let's get you ready for the summer Ibiza. You're going to have a great time. But in the meantime, because we've got 8 months, let's just have a bit of fun working towards these other kind of intrinsic goals that they had. And more often than not, people were like, whoa, I can't believe how long I've been able to stick to this program for, because I'm motivated by the fact that this week I've managed to do 2 push-ups. And a month ago I couldn't even do 1. And then the following week it's like, I've added an extra a kilo to my squat, or an extra, and it's so indescribable how good that feels for your self-efficacy, which we know is really important. Huge health motivator. And it's one of those things that I think is so incredibly important, and I've completely lost track of where I was going because I got so excited about self-efficacy. So what was the question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess, you were just talking about the motivation, of which, that in Australia is a lot more aesthetically driven than in the UK, in terms of the reasons why people might be motivated to actually exercise. And I loved everything you said just then, because one of the things that I always associate with you is, watching videos in your Insta story of you snowboarding somewhere in France or in Switzerland, wherever it was, and you saying, this is is the reason why I keep fit. So I can do stuff like that and just jump on my snowboard, once a year and be fine and be injury free and so forth, So I always think of that when once a year I jump onto my snowboard and pray to the Lord that I won't fracture any bones. So, doing exercise so that we can actually function in our everyday life and do the things we love doing and would like to do, even if we only do them once a year or something like that, and still be injury free and actually function to do those things, especially when you start, hitting 40 or something like that, and your body will start telling you, you can't just once a year jump onto a snowboard for a week without exercising for the remainder of the year. It's like, that used to be me. Not me anymore. So definitely influenced me there. What I wanted to ask you before was, so if you think back to little Shona, young Shona, in the UK, age 27 or what have you, just starting out with the Vertue method, is there any advice looking back now that you would like to give her?
So for young Shona, okay, so honestly, when you said that to me, I just felt that wave of like the teariness that you get sometimes, because hearing me talk to her, I think I feel a sense of like fragility for her and that makes sense, right? Because when we're younger, we are somewhat more fragile than when we're older, I think, in psychologically anyway. Well, that was the case for me. So I think that there's a number of things that I could say. I think one of the most important ones, and I think one of the ones that caused me the most trouble, was really around not being so afraid of what other people would think. And I gave so much psychological bandwidth to what I thought my friends would think, what I thought, my colleagues would think, what I thought different people. And I realized that in many ways, when they would critique my behavior or my choices, often it was just a projection of how they were feeling about themselves at the time. Maybe there was a jealousy or an envy that they had, or I was doing something that they wish they had the strength to do. So instead they would have to criticize what I was doing in some way in order to make themselves be okay with the fact that they weren't doing that. I think that's probably been my number one thing, is just know that anything that someone has to say about you, firstly, is none of your business, but also it's usually got to do with what's going on for them. And I think you have to be really, really, I don't want to say the word guarded, but I think you have to be selective with the people that you give power to, in the sense that you will take on their critique. And I think maybe it's a handful of people, maybe it's like 5 people or 3 people that you're truly willing to take some feedback from. And that's not to say that those people should always say good things, but it's more to say that you trust those people enough to give you the truth, and a truth that is somewhat uncluttered, or at least attempting to unclutter their own bias in that. And that's hard. It's really hard to eliminate bias, right? But it's about giving certain people in your life the power to have an opinion over what you did, and then taking that on and going, okay, cool, I see where you're coming from. I'm going to choose to move forward with that advice or not take it at all, right? And that's your choice. But I think if you allow every single person in your life, people who you don't even maybe want to live that kind of life, and you still take their opinion, you're going to have a lot of noise. And so I would really say to her, just stick with the few people who you respect, who you would like to emulate in some way, who you even aspire to be more like. Take the advice from them and then shut everyone else out.
Absolutely, and who respects you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a beautiful bit of advice there, Shona. And I've been taking notes as we've been chatting, and I've just sort of like tried to like summarize a little bit of like what we've encapsulated in the episode. And I've got be present, put your best self forward, value relationships, and then own it. I wrote own it / get it.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. Shona, this has been a truly beautiful conversation and really, really insightful to hear a little bit more around we see this beautiful public figure in that you are, and you're doing some amazing things and truly inspirational to so many people. And we really appreciate hearing all of the behind the scenes, because there's always more to the picture. We don't always hear it. It's not always what we showcase on socials and things like that. I know that you are quite great at sharing all of the bits and pieces that sit behind the scenes, but I hope that for our listeners, this has maybe uncovered a little bit more, and perhaps for some of our listeners, maybe this is the first time they've come across you. I mean, I'd probably find it hard to believe that that's the case, but maybe it is. But if that is the case, or if people are genuinely interested in learning a little bit more about what you do and hearing a little bit more about your journey and where you head to post your studies as well, where would be some of the best places for them to follow your journey?
Yep. So I would say all the social media channels, Instagram, TikTok, although on TikTok I'm a little slower because I'm old, but we're getting there. And then YouTube and my website, just shonavertue.com.
Fantastic. And obviously we'll link to all of those sites in the show notes as well. Shona, it's been such an honor, and you truly are such a beautiful person inside out. Thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to see what you're going to do in the future. I'm so excited for you. I know you're going to be even more fabulous, if that's even possible. All the best for you and your beautiful young family as well. You guys make me so happy just seeing your, footage on Instagram. So all the best for you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
All right, what a way to wrap up our season. And what a beautiful person Shona is, right? Oh, and you just feel the energy, just a beautiful conversation. And I mean, how blessed were we that she's given us her time. Obviously an incredibly busy person. I think that's probably part of the conversation that I'm going to lean into a little bit here. But for her to give us that time and be present with us for that time, it was really, really lovely.
100%, and I think you saying present is the perfect word, because I feel like that's exactly what she does. If she commits to something, she commits to it fully, and she certainly showed up presently, and authentically too. You don't feel as though she's putting up a facade ever, and I think that's the same vibe I get through following her on socials as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just one of the many things I love about her.
And full credit to her too. We had some beautiful conversations between what was actually in the episode, prior to like hitting record, and she's just the same person. It was no different. Yeah, that was something that I really, really loved. That authenticity part was beautiful. For me, the big thing here was the time blocking. I don't know if that's something that you were quite attuned to as well, but as I was listening to that, I was like, ooh, I get this.
100%. And you know just how busy she is too, or you get an idea as how busy she is, right? She's running her own enterprise. She's now got a little baby daughter, obviously people have lives as well. She's so popular. She's doing the social media and everything. You and obviously studying psychology.
And studying. Yeah.
Casually on the side. I know someone else who does that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is part of the reason. This is part of the reason why this episode really hit home. Yeah. I was like, oh yeah. I mean, I don't have a fitness regime nearly as good as what Shona's is, but geez, I aspire to. But no, she's really kicking some great goals there, and this notion of time blocking I really loved, and as we were saying, being really present in the moment, this notion of multitasking. I think people try and do it, quite frequently, and then they end up doing, a little bit of this task, a little bit of this task, and probably none of the tasks that they really need to get done well. And I've been guilty of this before as well. It is important to go, I'm going to be solely present here. And I do this with my friends. I do this at times with my work as well, but maybe not as often as I'd like to be able to do it.
Yeah. And I think, what I really loved about the chat too is because she spoke about time blocking, but also about boundaries. And I think that's exactly, they do need to go hand in hand. So time blocking being the idea that we just dedicate a certain amount of time to just one single task at a time, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you just said, I think we're all guilty of multitasking or attempting to multitask, which obviously research shows we're not very good at that. Maybe very mundane tasks, like, yes, maybe we can do the ironing and watch TV at the same time. I don't know why I gave that example. I don't do either of those. But, so with mundane tasks, it works. But make it any more complex than that, and it just doesn't work because of this thing called attention residue.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
With our brains just being focused on one task, and then we try to do the next thing, but it doesn't work. What our brains end up doing is not doing, several tasks at once, but our brains will have to switch very quickly the whole time. But we know that part of our attention is still always stuck on the previous task. It takes a while for the brain to sort of, be done with that and be able to move on. It's also why, for example, distractions, so having your notifications on your phone while you're doing your work is so bad. It's not the problem. The problem is not that you quickly read a message or you quickly read an email or something like that. That is not the time that is missing from your work task. It's the time that it takes your brain to actually then let go of what just happened in that email, in that message, and being able to refocus fully on the task you were working on before. That is the time that's missing. And I think, I don't know if it's true now, but I read at some stage it takes like 20 minutes or something like that and it probably varies a lot. But there's some interesting research by Dr. Sophie Leroy, who I think coined the term of attention residue. So there's some really cool, this key paper 2009 was published in Organization Behavior and Human Decision Processes, just in case people want to look it up, and it's called Why Is It So Hard to Do My Work? The Challenge of Attention Residue When Switching Between Work Tasks. So she's really the one who coined that term, and it's just some really interesting research.
Yeah, and when you think about it too, like I've definitely been guilty of this, but this is the reason why I've turned emails off on my phone during the work day, because it's like I only want to be present to the task that I'm doing at the time. Because like you said, you get a message come through or you get an email come through, and even if you look at it and you go, oh, I'll get back to that later, it's still in the back of your mind while you're trying to do the other task. And it's so counterintuitive to what we understand as being good practice. And we think about flow state, being completely immersed in a task, almost losing ourselves in it, and the time just passes by. If we want to set ourselves up for success with that and experience that in a lot of the tasks that we do, we need to remove these distractions and remove these boundaries. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. Shona admitted that she's not perfect at it, and I'm going to take a wild guess here and say that this is maybe something that you or even feel as though you could do a bit of work in as well. Only based on our. I'm just saying, based on our listeners, maybe you.
Making big assumptions here.
I would say, based on many of our chats, it's something that both of us still are working on quite actively. But we know that it's important, and I think too, also not being too harsh on ourselves too. It's a work in progress. I don't know that I've come across anybody. I know lots of really high functioning, exceptional leaders that do some amazing work, but I don't know that any of them would definitively say my boundaries are perfect. So I don't know that we can be too harsh on ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's exactly that. I think it's always work in progress, especially boundaries. I don't know, the world happens so fast. Everybody is so busy. There's constantly a million things going on. I think it's just something we will always have to have an eye on, and get better at, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we're consciously aware of it, I speak about this a lot in my coaching sort of sessions. I'm sure you do the same. It's now that we're consciously aware of something, we can actually give it a little bit more attention that it deserves to work on it. But if we're completely oblivious to it's like a blind spot in our habits or routines, we just sort of keep going down that pathway. But if we've got some idea about it, we can actually enact it and be a little bit proactive.
Exactly. The stages of change, isn't it? Or like the 4 levels of change from
Yep.
unconscious incompetence to conscious
Yep.
incompetence, so that we can then actually change a bad habit into a better habit. And of course, that takes time and effort. Until then, it becomes an unconscious competence, one of those good habits that we have. Absolutely. I love that too. And by the way, one thing I did want to mention, I'm sure everybody is aware of it, but just because I mentioned that research before, for those who don't necessarily go to academic journals to read into these topics, obviously Cal Newport's book called Deep Work, that was one of those, obviously international bestsellers, but also eye-openers for me, and I think where I first came across the whole idea of time blocking and just, doing deep focus work and stuff like that. So that's a fantastic book for anyone who hasn't read it. Or any of his other books. He's got some other fabulous books too. But yeah, Deep Work, absolutely loved it.
Some great insights in there, and a lot of great practices that I sort of take into my current study, as you sort of mentioned before, in amongst all the other things that are happening, getting a little bit of study. And it's really important to block that time aside, so that, because I've had uni assignments where I'll go to proofread them and I've written them at like 8 different times and like nothing joins up. Like, it is important to have that time blocked aside and then remove all distractions. So if I can have it, instead of being 8 sessions writing, it's only 4, that's great. If things flow a little bit nicer. But this episode really gave me some like good insights of like somebody else who's really successful in society, is doing a lot of really cool stuff, really proactive in the space of promoting a lot of the good things that we should be doing in life. It was nice to sort of see what was happening behind the scenes and know that the challenges that I'm feeling, the challenges that are felt by many others as well, and hopefully our listeners have felt as though they could resonate with some parts of, like, whatever your busyness in your day is. Hopefully they're able to gain some good insights from this conversation too.
Oh, absolutely. And just because you just mentioned it again, I just remembered Shona also mentioned the obstacle is the way. Just because you mentioned, the whole idea of challenges, we all have them. It doesn't matter what stage in our business we're at, in our lives we're at. It doesn't even matter the life domain, whatever. We all have challenges. And, I loved it when she said the obstacle is the way. Ryan Holiday's book, with the same title, but just the power in actually facing what is difficult for us, facing our problems, facing the crap. That is so easy to brush aside, ignore, try and deal with later or whatever. But it's just really is the best thing, isn't it? To face those challenges head on and actually work through them. It's the only way we can grow and get further ahead. So just thought I might throw that in there too, because I guess that's what this podcast is so much about too, isn't it? Acknowledging that we all have these struggles, but, best thing to do is just to, just face them head on.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've heard this saying, but a great leader that I worked with used to say, sometimes you just got to eat the frog. It's not something that you want to do, but you got to do it, right? At times. Yeah. So it is an important reminder. And sometimes, just to clear that mental space once we've done that too, it can be really beneficial. The longer it sits there, the longer it holds, the more we sort of feel the burden of that weight in our minds. So eat the frog. That's a good little one.
I actually know that as a productivity method as well. For our everyday tasks. Do the most difficult task first. Eat the frog first, and then you do the rest.
Yeah, sometimes I eat the frog maybe after 2 or 3 quick wins first. I change it up from time to time.
I do the same actually.
Sometimes I need to get the ball rolling, get a few runs on the board first.
Exactly. Also, sorry to all the vegetarians out there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, good point. Oh, well, this was another lovely chat. And as we round out this episode, but also the season 2, Mike, I want to say a big thanks to you for all your efforts. And our conversations too. It's been so enriching being able to share, this space with you and learn a lot from you in this space. And I'm sure our listeners are definitely feeling as though they're walking away with a wealth of knowledge and tips. At least I hope that's part of our intention of the podcast. So that is definitely what we're aiming for. And then to all our listeners, a massive thank you too for all your support as well. Launching a podcast was none of what we thought it was going to be, Micah. It's been a real journey. But all the love, support, beautiful messages that we get. Whenever Micah and I get a message, we like flick it straight to each other on WhatsApp. We're like, check this out. And we get so excited and energized.
It means the world, guys.
Yeah, and when we're in the thick of going through an editing process or like trying to figure out next direction, we get those beautiful messages that come through and they really energize us. So thank you all so much for the support. We're really keen for season 2 already. We've got some great names lined up. We can't wait to share it with you. But in the meantime, stay tuned to Instagram. We'll be dropping plenty more there around what's to come to keep you nice and excited. But again, thanks for your support. Reach out to us on Instagram if you've got any questions or queries. But for now, take care, look after yourselves, and we'll see you in season 2.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for listening to today's show. We hope our conversation helped normalize the struggles so many of us face on the path to success. While on the outside things often look like sunshine and rainbows, this is rarely the experience for anyone behind the facade.
But instead of letting that demotivate you, we hope it does the exact opposite, to let it fuel you to keep pursuing your purpose and realize your potential. Just without the added burden of feeling inadequate, and a little more patience, some tips, and self-compassion instead. For further info, head to our website, flourishingunfiltered.com, and get in touch with us via our socials, @flourishingunfiltered.
Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of loneliness, low mental health, or suicidal thoughts, please know that there are people who care and treatments that can help. We've compiled some helplines for you in the show notes.
It's a wrap for Flourishing Unfiltered today. Please give us a follow and leave us a comment and a review. We hope you tune in next time.